1920s in Harlem, also known as the Harlem Renaissance era. A phenomenal era where black artists helped, assisted, contributed to bringing back the economy, coming together, unifying. It was a time period where vibrations were high, where there was dance, there was song, there was paint, there was poetry, there was music, there was comedy. There was individuals like Langston Hughes, Duke Ellington, right? And I'm gonna say this again, brothers like Langston Hughes, Duke Ellington, and many more. This is an important period and shift for my generation, being born in the late 80s, right? To be able to witness and see. So everything after that, everybody or every child that was born after that, I feel like sometimes we don't, especially in our city, Sacramento, California, we don't get to see collective blackness, collective art, and to really understand where we come from or who we come from. So I feel like this project would just be amazing to bring, especially to a place called Valley High on that road where I was actually raised, just to teach art, just to teach unity. I'm sure there'll be many, if not all the kids that will be there that will find the art form that their spirit connects to, and possibly even find their career path, possibly even find their purpose. So Harlem Renaissance Project, I'm looking forward to it. Cool and cold, I'll be there.
Why is the Harlem Renaissance important to me? Well, growing up, I have always had a fondness for art, but it was sometimes my energy was directed in the wrong situations. You know, I started out doing graffiti, got in trouble for it, and actually got into an art school. And while I attended art school through the 7th through 12th grade, we studied a wide variety of art history, but we never covered any aspect of the Harlem Renaissance. It wasn't until after I had got out of the military, came home, had enrolled in a junior college in Oakland named Laney College, and I met who at that time will become my mentor for life. His name is David Bradford. He posed a very serious question to me. He said, "Boy, don't you know black people paint too?" And I didn't have a response to that because I hadn't studied any African American artists up to that point. So he set me on a path of self-discovery. He told me that we could talk about anything, but we couldn't talk about art until I learned about the accomplishments of African Americans in fine art. And the first artists I landed on were the artists of the Harlem Renaissance, and it's been a love affair ever since.
The Harlem Renaissance Project was a magical time period for African American artists. And that experience of them achieving greatness just didn't arrive for them during that time period. They were already achieving greatness, their ancestors prior to them, and those ancestors passed that greatness on to them, and they've been able to pass it on to us. But what we want to do with this project, we want to be able to pass it on to the future generation. Because it's like the life of those dynamic artists, especially the visual artists, never lived. They're not being taught in the history books to our young people today. So they don't know nothing about these artists. And Sojourner Truth Museum, we want to change that dynamics. We want them to know about Charles White and Augusta Savage, Charles Austin, Lois Mailou Jones, and all the great artists of that time period. For me, as a visual artist, I was connected with those artists without even knowing it. I don't know about some of you visual artists out there, but I had a habit of going to people's homes and grabbing their magazines and ripping them apart. And I have tons of file cabinets with clippings of great images from great artists. And my grandmother, she would save magazines for me, like Upscale magazine and Jet magazine and Essence, Ebony. So when I got to her house, it was like a field day for me. I would sit down on the floor and I would start ripping magazines. But later in my life, I would say in my early 20s, when I began to find out about these great artists, I realized I was already connected.
I've known from a very early age that I loved art, but I never really saw anyone who looked like me doing it, except for my father, who loved to draw and paint. And it wasn't until I was in college that I realized that someone who looked like me could even have a career in art. Because that was the first time that I was exposed to artists of the Harlem Renaissance. I was in an art history class, I think around 18 years old, and the professor started talking about all of these amazing artists that I had never heard of before. And I saw the artwork that they were creating, the images of black, brown skin, the cultural images, things that were influenced from Africa, different textiles, masks, shapes. And I was amazed, like, where had all of these artists been all my life? And that really lit a fire in me to learn more about them. I did artwork of my own that was inspired by work that they did. And it was because of them that I really started to kind of develop my own style after seeing not only the work that they produced, but also the struggle that they endured in just trying to do what they loved. It really inspired me to continue creating. And I actually have this little Scholastic magazine that I saved from, goodness, I think it's 2004, because it's got some images of some of my favorite artists in it. And I've just kept it as a reminder to me of some of the artwork, and also to show different images to children that I've worked with over the years who I knew loved art, but again, never saw anyone like them doing it, as a way to inspire them and to keep them motivated to pursue their creative pursuits. And that's one of the reasons why I think the Harlem Renaissance Project is going to be so important to the community, and particularly to youth of color who go every day and never seeing positive images of themselves on a poster, on a billboard, or an ad, or in artwork, and helping them to create and be inspired by not only artwork that is a representation of them, but also artwork done by artists who look like them.
Hi, my name is Jerry Simpson. I'm an artist in Sacramento. I feel that it's important that young people learn about the Harlem Renaissance because at one point in 1920s, Harlem was the cultural center of the world. All artists, musicians, poets, sculptors, everybody was heading there and making their way to Harlem because it was a place to be. If you didn't get to Harlem, you went to Paris. But Harlem is the place. We had artists such as Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, Count Basie. We had Aaron Douglas, Archibald Motley, Richard Mayhew, Jacob Lawrence. We had artists that were amazing. So when given a chance to talk about the Harlem Renaissance, let it flow. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
My name is Harley White Jr., and I am a music historian and a music activist, and I'm very interested in the period that we call the Harlem Renaissance. The time frame is mutable. I consider it 1920 to 1945, or the end of the First War to the beginning or the end of the Second World War. It's a very important history lesson for African Americans because it was when the different disciplines actually came together and worked together collectively to make a new stance as far as our place in American culture. And so it's a lesson that needs to be revisited annually, monthly, as we try to navigate our culture and our children towards a more esteemed place, a cooperative space. A lot of progress was made during the Harlem Renaissance. So that's probably the most important reason why I support people who participate in the Harlem Renaissance, but I'm also actively involved myself. Talking about my interests, I have a 9-piece orchestra that is dedicated to the spirit of the Harlem Renaissance. We have a lot of music from that period, from Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, lots of the swing hits, and I also happen to know the stories that are involved, and in many cases the dances that are involved with these different artists and songs and movement. We're talking about Broadway also. We're talking about the whole Tin Pan Alley. We're talking about James Reach Europe and marches. We're talking about Irene and Vernon Castle and the proliferation of American dance. So these are the things. This is why I should be involved.
Peace and blessings, everyone. This is going to be an exciting, amazing summer. We are going to introduce the Renaissance program. That was an era full of wonderful, creative, innovative, beautiful, talented individuals. James Baldwin, Miles Davis, Duke Ellington, Ma Rainey. So it's our time to educate our youth about their ancestors. Okay, so this is again going to be a wonderful program. I'm blessed and honored to be a part of it. And so yes, stay tuned. And yes, we're going to share a lot of knowledge. We're going to have fun. So stay tuned and be ready. All right. Peace and blessings.
And I am a visual artist. I have been invited to participate in this placemaking project with Sojourner Truth. Thank you, Shona, for your invitation. I have been asked to represent the works of James Weldon Johnson, which is, I love his work because of the storytelling that he does in his work. He's always been a favorite for me. And also Lois Mailou Jones, because of her the use of geometric abstract in her work, and that has always been a favorite for me. I stand before you in front of some of the art projects that I have done. These murals are reflective of her style with geometric abstract. I'm excited about this project because it is an example of placemaking and people gathering, and it will enlighten the families and the boys and girls that will come here for years to come. Shona has worked tirelessly in the Sacramento area, in the South Sacramento area, to reflect art and culture in her programming. She has a mural installation at the Florin Road Business Incubator, which we started many years ago. And I'm so impressed about how it has grown over the last decade and a half. Again, the work that I'm going to do is a vertical mural, and it will stand 10 feet tall, and it will be approachable from 4 different directions. It will be one of the centerpieces of this installation. Again, thank you, Shona, for your invitation. I am looking so forward to working on this project with you all. The Harlem Renaissance.